Hello, hey y'all. Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey y'all, Privyet. That means hello in Russian. Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast. I'm your host, Christen Clark. The Collide Kids podcast is a show for kids and families where we learn together how life and faith collide. I am so glad that you are listening today. Thank you so much for tuning in each week and enjoying this time together. Well, did you enjoy the Christmas intro? You know, I love me some Christmas music. It may not be Christmas time just yet, but it is time to start talking about a very important ministry called Operation Christmas Child. Operation Christmas Child uses a simple shoebox gift as an opportunity to share the love of Jesus Christ. I am so excited to talk about this today, and I will tell you much more about how you can get involved with this ministry at the end of this episode. Well, you are about to hear from someone who actually received a shoebox gift when he was a child, and his story today shows how meaningful and special this gift was for him. Vladimir Prokhnevskiy was born in the country of Ukraine. Growing up in a family of 9 kids, Vlad did not get many gifts, so it was a very special occasion when one harsh winter day, Vlad and his siblings rode a bus and then a tram to get to the church where shoeboxes were handed out. The brightly colored gifts stood out immediately. The shoebox represented unconditional love and so much more. And you're going to hear all about that today. His family moved to the United States when he was 12, and he now lives in Charlotte, North Carolina with his wife and 2 kids. And he works with Operation Christmas Child to share his story. I'm so excited for you guys to hear this inspiring story from my friend Vlad Prokhnevskiy. Vlad, thank you so much for being on the Collide Kids podcast. How are you today?
Doing well. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yes, or I should say, Privyet.
Privyet. Как дела?
I am very
proud.
That's right.
You speak Russian.
That's right. I'm very proud of like the 6 Russian words that I know. And so I'm excited
That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know.
I actually visited Ukraine a few years ago, and I learned that the Russian word for pizza is pizza. I was like, I'm good.
You know, it's funny because my friend, when I moved to the United States, they were asking me like, how do you say stop in Russian? And I go, stop. No, stop in Russian. I'm like, no, it is stop.
Stop. That's
Stop.
what it is. That's right. And
Sometimes.
I also learned, I use da a lot, which is yes. And so
That's
people would
right.
ask me questions and I would just say da. I would just say yes all the time.
But it's funny because in America, people usually say like, duh, you know.
Right.
So I remember for the longest time I was confused. Why people say duh.
You're like, why do they keep agreeing? That's so funny. Oh, well, okay. So will you introduce yourself to our listeners today and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Vladimir Viktorovich Prokhnevskiy. I know with a name like that, I feel sorry for my kids, but don't worry. I named my kids Ashton and Elliot to simplify their names a little bit because nobody had to inherit my last name. But I am a full circle speaker for Samaritan's Purse Operation Christmas Child. What that means is that when I was 9 years old, I received a shoebox from Samaritan's Purse Operation Christmas Child. And so from time to time, occasionally I get to share my testimony, my story. For wherever they send me, I'll send it. That's what I do. But I'm also a father. I have 2 kids. I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, 2 boys, and they're just now starting school. And in fact, my oldest just had his first day in school, so it was kind of fun. And my youngest will be starting on Thursday, and I've been married for 11 years and just enjoying my life here in Charlotte, North Carolina, in Queen City.
That's amazing. That's so cool. I can't wait to hear your story because one of my favorite mission service projects that my family does together and my church has always done is Operation Christmas Child. So I love that we get to talk about this today. But before we get into all of that, I always love to ask my guests to share a joke because this is a podcast for kids. So do you have a good joke you can share with us?
You know what? It's not so much a joke, but something funny. And it kind of ties into my story. I was asking my kids for jokes and they were telling me some jokes to share. I'm like, I better not tell jokes. But, when I was a kid, when I received my shoebox, one of the things I got in the shoebox was dental floss. And I thought it was candy. I remember thinking like, wow, you guys have crazy candy in America. And I was just got a lot of it together in a ball, just popped it in my mouth like a mint. And I remember my whole mouth was just so numb from all that mint. And I remember thinking, man, that's some awesome candy in America. And there's a guy who was sitting across from me. He was kind of puzzled, confused, and he came over and he tried to explain to me in his broken Russian what it really was. And so he kind of started showing me that you kind of demonstrating like it was something for the teeth. So what I got of it was like a toothbrush substitute, which confused me even more. I was okay with it just being maybe some random Diet American candy or something like that. But now I was even more confused because I was like, well, toothbrush, that's very effective, but like this fancy string, like how's that supposed to brush your teeth? And I remember I was like, well, only fools reject things they don't understand. And that evening I witnessed several beautiful, perfect American smiles. So I was like, well, clearly it's working for them. So whatever it is, it's working. And it wasn't until many years later when we moved to the United States, we were at a first dentist appointment in a small town of Kingsport, Tennessee, where I found out what it was really for. The dentist went sideways, started going between the teeth. And I just remember thinking, that's what it's for. So I felt pretty silly, but that was my dental floss story.
That's amazing. I love that. I've heard a lot of stories similar to that of people that have opened their boxes and found things and they didn't know didn't know what they were for. So that's funny that you thought that was candy. We do have some strange candy here in the United States. So
that's true. That's true.
You're not too far off. There probably is some dental floss candy out there somewhere. But
if there isn't, there should be.
That's fun. Okay, so let's talk about this. So you grew up in Ukraine. Tell us about just give us your story. Like, tell us about where you came from and how all this got started.
So I come from a family of 9 children, huge family.
Wow.
And we grew up so it's kind of funny. I guess it's not funny, but it's kind of funny. I'm older than my country, which is not a lot of people can say that. Because I was born in 1987. It was still USSR. So imagine being born in America and let's say you were born in Tennessee and then all of a sudden, a few years later, the whole country collapses and your state becomes a country. And so that's what happened to me. The state that I was living in at the time was Ukraine, and then it became a country in 1991. So I'm older than my country, which is kind of cool. And but when we were growing up in Soviet Union, and because my father was a Christian, he was a believer, he was a pastor, and we lived in a country, in a society where it was not allowed to be a Christian. And so my dad had to go underground. He had to be an underground pastor. He can only preach. They would have to hide. They would have to have church services in the middle of the woods and different apartment complexes. And they would try to change places as much as possible. And because in my country, at that time in Soviet Union, everything was owned by the state. So there was you couldn't just start your own business like you can here in America. Everything, all the production, everything was owned by the government. And the government was the only authority in making money. And so my father couldn't just pick up and start his own company, but because he lived in Soviet Union, he was hindered from advancing in our society. Because a lot of times people ask me like, why were you guys so poor? We weren't poor because my parents were lazy. We were poor because the government prevented us from advancing. They didn't want Christians to have any kind of positions in the office, or they wouldn't let them go to higher education, higher colleges and those kinds of things. So my dad had to settle for low-paying jobs. And every time he was captured and written up by the local authority, it affected his pay even more. So it got to the point to where we had to take turns to go outside to play because we couldn't afford enough shoes for everybody. So I would take my shoes, I'd put them on, I'd go outside and play with my friends. And then after some time, I would come back and take the shoes off and give it to the next person in line. And we also, that's not the only thing we had to share. We also had to share our toothbrushes. Now that's a humbling one. I would brush my teeth, and then when I'm finished, I would give it to my mom, and she would wash it with hot water and soap, and then she would give it to the next person. And we didn't have access to a lot of toys, especially new toys. But what's so cool, we got so creative. we would go outside, we'd find Coca-Cola caps. And back in those days, like back in the 90s, Coca-Cola just entered the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union. And we found the Coca-Cola bottles. We took the caps off on both. We would find like 2 Coca-Cola bottles. We'll take the caps off. And you know how bottles, they come with like, you have to break the seal from a cap to like this ring that attached to the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And the old school rings, if you take that ring off and invert it, it had little spikes on the inside. And so as you can imagine, when you invert it, the spikes are sticking up. And so we would slide those rings with spikes on the ends of the Coca-Cola caps. So our yo-yos literally had spikes, and so our yo-yos were like weapons. I mean, we were able to cut through paper, through grass. We were like scientists, like, what else can this thing cut? Yeah,
that's awesome.
And we were like 8 or 9 years old, so very creative at that age, which probably explains why I'm a web designer, developer, and my brother is a motion designer, my sister's a photographer. So we're all into like creative fields. Maybe that it contributed.
Sure.
And then we would also play with our shoes, pretending they were cars. Some days they were airplanes, boats. We pretty much used our imagination. And another thing we did, and I still do it with my kids. It's so much fun. I think anyone who's listening should try this. It's so much fun. There's no copyright. Definitely try it. We would find a piece of paper, and we would draw on that piece of paper like like different roads. We try to recreate our neighborhood. And on a separate piece of paper, we would draw cars that were proportional to the roads, and we would cut out those cars. And so it was like Google map bird's eye view kind of thing, you know, driving on top of the roads. It was so much fun. And to this day, I still do it with my kids, but now we improve the product. Now we color the cars and the buildings, and we make buildings in 3D and cars in 3D. So we try to like, you know,
wow.
It's 21st century. We got to improve things. So we try to improve it. And everybody wants to know, like, Vladimir, what did you guys eat? Like, what kind of food was back home? And we couldn't afford a lot of food, especially like meat and more of a higher end kind of foods. And we didn't go out to eat. I remember the first time I went to a restaurant was like, well, when we were in the United States, like everything was cooked at home. And we pretty much grew up on rice and potatoes, which I often jokingly say that we were vegetarians before it was even cool or popular.
You were so cool being a vegetarian.
And that was kind of like our background. And we grew up with this tiny 3-bedroom apartments, old Soviet apartment. It was colorless. It was small. And there was, you know, with parents altogether, 11 folks living in that tiny, I had to share a room with like 4 people. And it was a tiny room. It was like smaller than average American room. And we didn't have a washer and a dryer. So my mom, she would literally have to do all the laundry by hand.
Wow.
And the tub was always filled with clothes. And because of the amount of laundry that my mom had to do, her skin would often crack and bleed. And then Mom, she would stay up all night, and she would make socks and underwear for us just out of old clothes that had holes in them or donated material. So my mom was also very creative, very resourceful. And it was during that time that we were invited to come to a Christmas celebration. And so that's kind of like the paint you a big picture of what life was before the shoebox experience. And then it was after that's when we were invited. It was like in the middle of cold winter. We had to hop on the bus, on the tram. It was not very close at all. We lived in a big city, and but it was worth the ride. We were so excited.
So was this Christmas celebration at a church, or what kind of place did you have that?
Yeah, so it was kind of I think it was like a church / like a government building kind of thing at the time. And what was so cool is that in my country, for example, like things are different. You know, everything's different between this country. You've been, so you know what I'm talking about. But we don't celebrate Christmas like Americans do. We celebrate New Year's. You know, old man winter comes on New Year's and he brings gifts. So nobody celebrates. New Year's is a big deal. Christmas is more for like the religious people that. And, you know, we grew up in a culture where people weren't religious at all. So Christmas was almost unheard of. Only us Christians knew. And so when we were invited to come to this Christmas celebration, I thought that it would be filled with just Christians. But what was so interesting is that when we pulled up to this location, I was walking in with a girl that I recognized from my class. And I didn't know, like, I knew that she was not a Christian, and I was just surprised to see her there because, again, I thought this was only for Christians. It was a Christmas celebration. But to my surprise, this place was filled with people from all walks of life. And it was so cool because you've been to Ukraine, so, you know, it's very grayscale. There's not as much colors, especially in the city where I lived in Kyiv. There's just not much color, especially in the old Soviet Union days. There was not much color at all. Everybody kind of had the same pair of shoes, the same clothes. Everything was kind of grayscale. And this was in the middle of cold Ukrainian winter, colorless winter. And when we walked into this building, it's like we transitioned from this black and white, Ukrainian winter to a warm room that was filled with so much color, so much love. It was beautiful. And it's so cool because they gave us these juices and snacks that I've never had before. That's so many different what's so unique about this whole experience is that they presented the gospel to us in so many different and unique ways that I couldn't even imagine. I mean, it was all presented through like singing, dancing, cartoons, movies, animations, flannel boards. I remember the first time I saw a flannel board. I've never seen anything like it. It was like this canvas went to having like an island and a boat, and they were telling stories. The whole time I was like, how are they doing? Is this magic? Like, how is it sticking up on the board? And then like the songs, the singing, the dancing, it was so much to take in. It was so interesting that by the end of the evening, if you didn't understand what the gospel was all about, you weren't paying attention because they went above and beyond. It was so visual. It was so clear. And it was done in such ways that it was so effective, especially with so much color, so much singing. And, if they stopped at that, it would have been enough because it really was like a big birthday party for everyone. And then at the very, very end, that's when they brought out these, I have one here with me, beautiful and colorful shoeboxes. And man, what an experience that was. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, tell us about that. I think that's fascinating too, because as a person that's packed a shoebox before, I don't know how it's presented or how it's given. I love watching some of the videos that Samaritan's Purse puts out showing like how shoeboxes travel through boat and on a camel and on a jet. Like they go everywhere. But then when they're presented to the kids, it's not just that they like toss it to a child. They have this huge celebration. I think that's amazing to think about. Yeah. And so you got a shoebox. So everyone around you, like everyone in your family got a box as well? We'll be right back after this. Raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app.
Yes. And it was such a fun, it's one of those things when you think from childhood, you think back, you forget about the little details of things, but you never forget how it made you feel. Yeah. It was like time stopped for a moment. We were all on the floor because we got them. I can't remember if they told us we can open them so we could open some there, but not all. But when we came home, we just like let it go. We just looked at these things. And I just remember just passing our toys around, and it's just like this, like time stopped, and we were just like the slow motion kind of, we were able to forget about all of our struggles and just be kids. What was so cool about the shoebox, like the first impression, is that how much color it had. Like when you open up the shoebox, the first thing that stood out to me was just the color, the smells, and the sounds. And I'll explain, like to this day, when I go through in the store, like through the detergent aisle with their soaps, like it brings me back immediately to the shoebox because I smelled the soap, American soap there, and was so strong. I also like the sound of wrapping paper, like especially those the plastic ones, the see-through ones, those wrapping sounds of new toys that are wrapped around. And I never had new toys before, so the sound of wrapping paper always like kind of brings back to the shoebox. But the color is what was so special because it's a lot to take in. There's like, you open up the box and your eyes just going everywhere. The smells, the sounds, it's just like, whoa, you're trying to process it all and you don't even know where to start. So just the opening experience was something to experience. And then when you start seeing what's in it, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like what is this thing? But for me, what was so interesting is that everything that I grew up with playing with is like it manifested, like all the toys that I made from scratch, they're like manifested in real life inside of a shoebox, but actual real toys. Yeah, like the yo-yo that I used to make, now I had my own yo-yo, and my yo-yo was like the coolest, colorful yo-yo in the neighborhood. Nobody had anything similar to that. I
That's
had
awesome.
my own toothbrush, and my toothbrush, so I didn't have to share it anymore with anybody, but my toothbrush was like a rock star toothbrush. It had like so much color, so much personality, the way it was designed. It was just like work of art. It was beautiful. And again, no one in my city had anything similar like that. I had school supplies, and growing up, some people might think it's like, well, school supplies, kids are not excited about school supplies, but I was excited about school supplies because I was ridiculed for not having school supplies in school. And in some ways it prevented me from learning, because I remember like every time a class would start, I would get like anxious because I knew that I didn't have a pen and paper. And I knew that my teacher would get very upset if I told her I don't have it. So I would run around the class, just ask for anybody for a spare pencil or pen or paper. And they would all just like roll their eyes and say things like, oh my gosh, just get your own, you beg for one every time. And so then I have an identical twin brother, copy paste. If you meet one, you met the other. It's just like the same experience. So we both would sit there and just look at each other right before, like when the bell would ring, is like, would bring so much anxiety. I'm like, here we go, buckle up, it's about to happen. And so the teacher would be like, all right, everyone, get your school supplies. And here, me and my twin brother were just sitting there so sad, just like, oh boy, here it comes. And then she would look at us and she would say, all right, boys, where are your school supplies? And we're like, so we were embarrassed to tell her that we couldn't afford them, but instead we told her that we forgot them. And so she would ridicule us in front of the whole class. She would make us get up in front of the class, walk around and beg for a pen and paper. And all the classmates would just roll their eyes and tell us how irresponsible we are. And so when I got my pencils and pens and papers, not only were they, actual school supplies, but they were from another country. There was so much color, again, personality. No one in my school had anything similar. I was like a cool kid for a very long time. Everybody wanted what I had, which was pleasantly, it was just nice to just finally feel like you're part of the group.
And just for something so simple that I think a lot of people take for granted, and just you being excited about school supplies in your box. What were some other things in your box that just meant a lot to you? You said you talked about the dental floss and school supplies. What were some other things?
I had like the what are they called? The Hot Wheel cars, right? Yeah, Hot Wheel cars. And growing up, again, I had to play with my shoes pretending they were cars. And now I had the real thing. I had my own cars. Like I didn't have to. So it's like everything really did manifest. The floss or the toothbrush, the yo-yo, the Hot Wheel cars. All those things were so special. And everybody always wants to know what's the special thing in a box, like that wow item. And for me, it was dental floss, but a lot of people, it's different things. Like, for example, for my sister, Nadia, she got a Barbie. And you understand Barbies, you may understand, but Barbies back then were like, in my country, they were hard to come by. They were like luxury items. Only the rich had them. And in fact, we lived in a big city, and in our neighborhood, there was only one girl who was able to afford a Barbie. And this girl was not allowed to take this Barbie outside because her mom was afraid that it would get stolen, broken, or lost. And so what this girl would do, she would get on her balcony. It was like a sad scene from Romeo and Juliet. She would get on the balcony and she would show this Barbie to all the little girls in the neighborhood, and they would all gather around the balcony and just look up and wish that they had this Barbie. And so when my sister, when she got her Barbie, she made sure to arrange sleepovers with this Barbie with all the little girls in the neighborhood. So every girl got to take this Barbie home at least once. And right before we moved to the United States, we took this Barbie and we gave it to another family. And then we wanted to follow up to see where it went. And then that family gave it to another family. That family gave it to another family. So 20 some years later, this Barbie is still blessing somebody. So I just want to encourage you guys that, your gifts go further than you think, and they bless more people than you think.
That's so encouraging to hear that. Like you said, we don't know how much it blesses someone.
Yeah. I was excited about dental floss, right? Yeah. Minty candy, as I call it.
That's right. That you thought was a strange way to brush your teeth. Okay. So you guys got your shoe boxes, and then you said you moved to the States. So were you still a child when you moved to the United States?
Yes. I moved to the United States at the age of 12. Which was in the year 2000, and what a culture shock it was. And, well, just before we moved to the United States, there's a local mafia that found out that we were moving, that we sold our apartment for very little money, but they found out that we sold the apartment. Like 2 or so weeks before our move, a girl knocked on our door, one of my sister's friends, and she overheard a conversation that they wanted to kidnap one of the kids for ransom. Wow. And so as you can imagine, added so much stress. So we had to hire a bus, like charter a bus with bodyguards.
Wow.
We moved in the middle of the night, 3:00 in the morning. We couldn't tell anybody we were moving. Everyone found out from letters after we already moved to the United States. So as you can imagine, that was my experience leaving Ukraine. And you were at that same airport where we came out of, so you can kind of relate. And so I remember sitting in that airport. We all had to be in a little room, and we were worried. And I'll never forget the face, my parents' face when we were all in the airplane taking off, just airborne. And I looked at them, and they were just breathing. Finally, I think my dad turned gray overnight because of all that stress. And then we got to the United States, and it was a totally different experience. From what I remember, we had 2 churches sponsor our move here in the United States. It was so cool. We had strangers show up at our house and bring us food every day. They found us a place to live. They covered our rent for a while until we got on our feet. They mentored us. They took us on their vacations with them. Members from both churches would show up almost every day with their favorite dishes to take us shopping. It was Southern hospitality at its best. It was in East Tennessee. It was such a moving experience. I remember Mom, when she saw washer and dryer, she was just in tears every night. Just so much generosity and love was poured over us. Love is contagious. Love it spreads like wildfire. And it was so cool how much love we've experienced. And we didn't know a word of English. I think I asked for an apple on the airplane, and I felt so proud of myself. I'm like, I got this English stuff. And we learned our English in Tennessee. Sounds good to me, where they called me Vladimir. I think it's other thing.
That is how we say Vladimir.
But it was, the Southern generosity. I remember when I went to Ohio State for college, and I would call the bank in East Tennessee just so I can hear that Southern accent, because it brought me so much comfort. Just hearing the Southern accent, it was because that's what I associated with just love and generosity, because first impression was the South, and experiencing that Southern hospitality is somewhere deep in my heart. It's always going to be there. So I'm a Southerner at heart. That's where I learned my English, and I'm proud of it.
I love that. And just the generosity and kindness that community showed you. That's just so amazing.
Beautiful.
So you guys moved, and now you work for Samaritan's Purse. Tell us how you got into reconnecting with Operation Christmas Child.
Yeah, so I have, like I mentioned earlier, I have an identical twin brother. He, when we both lived, so we moved from Kingsport, Tennessee up to Ohio, Columbus side, because my parents, they didn't speak the language, and they wanted to be part of a Russian church so they can serve. And so there was a Russian church there. So they moved up there. I followed them shortly after high school and went to college there at Ohio State. And so after college, my identical twin brother decided to pursue his career in Charlotte, North Carolina, to work for Fox Sports as a motion designer. He animates the robot on Fox Sports, does all the graphics for, with a team, does the graphics for him. And so that was his dream job. And so he went there, and he's my twin brother, and he already had 2 kids. I have 2 kids, and they're roughly the same age. They're very close. And so I was just like, I'm going to follow him. Like, you have to follow my brother. And so I went down there. I went through the Billy Graham library, and it was just an amazing experience. I remember thinking, I wonder if they're hiring. And so I applied for a web design development job. They flew me in almost immediately for an interview. And during one of the interviews, and one of the questions they asked me if I had any prior experiences or something like that. Somehow we started talking about that. And I remember that these shoeboxes were somehow connected with Billy Graham. Now I understand that Samaritan's Purse is a sister organization of Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. And so I just happened to mention it. And I was just like, oh, everybody gets these shoeboxes, right? Like I thought, I remember when I was in Tennessee, during the collection week, I saw the logos by churches. I'm like, oh, it must be that time of the year where these kids get shoeboxes. How wonderful. They're probably, I hear people in America, I thought, you graduate, get to a certain age and you get a shoebox and a Bible. I was like, oh, that's probably what it is. And so I thought, I didn't think that it's just for us special kids in the third world countries. And so anyway, that's when I found out they're like, no, that's not how it works at all. And so I was like, oh, wow, it's interesting. And so then they asked me, he's like, well, would you like to occasionally share your story from time to time? And I said, oh, absolutely. So needless to say, I got the job 5 years later. And I'm still sharing my story because I'm so excited about this project, because once you understand that this is not just a gift, not only do kids get a special gift filled with school supplies, brand new toys and hygiene items, but most importantly, these kids get introduced to the best gift giver, Jesus. And because of these shoeboxes, thousands of churches have been planted. I'm just one of 188 million shoebox recipients since 1993, the start of the project, that happened to receive one of these shoeboxes. These shoeboxes are so effective. They're so powerful, but so important that the gospel comes with these shoeboxes. I always say that if you want to show love to a parent, you show love to it's through their children, right? It's like, if you want to show love to me, love on my kids, and that's how you get to my heart. And so these shoeboxes, not only do they bless the children, but they bless the parents, and then the children come home and they minister to parents. It has just a huge ripple effect. When we pack shoeboxes with my boys now, that's how I demonstrate generosity to them, to get to see it and partake in it, and because I want my boys to be generous. And it just has there's so many sermons in between there we can go on.
Really is.
But it is a beautiful project, and I'm so excited and honored to be part of it.
I love Operation Christmas Child just for the fact that it's something that a family can do together.
Right.
It's a way that parents can show their kids, like you said, how to be generous, but it's also something that's easy for kids to be involved. So the fact that there's this amazing project that, like you've shared today, it has an incredible impact on not just that one person that gets the box, but that whole family, that whole community, that whole country is impacted by each box. And I think that's such an amazing thing to think about. So I'm really thankful that you're sharing your story. I love hearing stories like this. It's just so cool. One of the things that I think is amazing too is that if you can't make your own shoebox, there's ways you can do it online. So could you talk about that a little bit, about some ways that people can connect with online?
You can go to samaritanspurs.org/OCC, and you can actually build it online. You know, I don't know if you ever ordered pizza online, like you can like drop all the droppings, you know, like different toppings and things like that in there. It's kind of cool. It's the same experience. I still think, you know, it's a cool alternative, but I still think there's so much power in packing it in person as well. Because like you said, it brings families together. And you know, my mom, I remember growing up, she was ridiculed for having such a large family, and so people would say some hurtful things like, "What are you doing bringing such a large family into this world? They're going to become criminals." And so my mom, she countered the lies, and she would always take her hands and she would put her hands on her belly and she would speak life over us. She would, because she understood the devil's a liar, whatever he says, it's not the truth. And she would speak the opposite. And so now when I look at these shoeboxes, when I pack for these shoeboxes, they're not just boxes. It's a child. And so when I'm finished packing my shoebox, first of all, I include a note and a picture, because, you know, some of these kids, they don't have a family, and they will look at your picture and they'll like, wow, I got a gift. This is my family. And they'll adopt you without you even knowing it. They'll hold on to this picture for the rest of their lives. And on the back, I always include a little message. I always say that, hey, little buddy, I packed everything I always wanted when I was 9. And when I was 9, I received one of these boxes, and I tell them the story, how we grew up in darkness and God brought us from darkness into light. And at the end, I always say, you know, this life is like a race. It's not about how you start your race, though. It's like a marathon, right? But it's how you finish your race. And so I always say, finish strong, little buddy. And that's my little message to him. But the most important thing, I take this shoebox and I put it on my stomach, just like, you know, a child in the belly, just like my mom used to do. And I would speak life over this child. I would speak, you know, this child, everything he touches will prosper. He'll be the head, not the tail. And just speak all these different scriptures over this child. Because once you shift your mindset, this is not just a gift, it's a child. And once you start picturing it like that, it becomes real. Ah, man, chills just thinking about all that.
That's amazing. I always love whenever we're having a packing party at our church where we're all doing it together. We always, every 15 minutes, we'll stop and we'll just put our hands over a box and we'll pray over that box. Not because the box is going to have magical powers now after we pray over it, but because we know that God is going to use that box to change someone's life. And like you said, it's going to go to a child and to a family. And so I love that. And whenever I've volunteered at the distribution centers where they pack all the boxes onto the crates and things like that, they always do that there as well. They always stop and everyone stops and we all pray together. And you just feel like connected to the rest of the world in that moment. It's so amazing.
Prayer seals the deal. It's kind of like, you know, I always say when you pray over anything in Jesus' name, it like changes frequencies. It becomes like a box full of Jesus, box full of light. And children, you know, when you pack these shoe boxes, you pack them with so much love and you pray over them. Children feel that same love that you pack it with. And what happens to a dark area when light shows up? All the darkness has to flee. And that's the way I look at these shoe boxes. They're like boxes full of light, full of love, full of Jesus. And that right there is powerful.
That's amazing. Well, Vlad, I have so enjoyed hearing your story today. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing about that. I always love to ask my guests at the end to share a memory from when they were a kid. So you shared quite a few memories from your childhood. Do you have another one you want to close out with?
Yes, this one was so cool to me. It's so special. I don't even know why it's so special, but it is. I remember my sister, they were given a piece of candy, and they could have eaten it right there by themselves, because that was a rare thing to come by. We didn't have much of that. And but they saved it, came home and waited till we were all together and gave it to my dad. And then my dad, he sliced a small candy. It was like a small Snicker bar, sliced in like 9 pieces or whatever. And he passed it on to everybody. And we were sitting there in a circle. We were eating that piece of candy, and we were taking our time, because we didn't want to just eat it all. You want to take almost licking the candy just because you want it to last longer. And I just remember the feelings and emotions that I was experiencing in that moment. I remember that just like love, family bonding love. And that was powerful. To this day, I think about it and I just remember thinking like, I'm so blessed. We have nothing, but we have everything. Now thinking about it, it's like, oh my gosh, that's just a little piece of candy, but how much that meant to me. And for some reason, that memory is in my mind a lot. And it's a beautiful memory. It's generosity, it's love, unconditional love, because this life is so complex, a lot of things, but what's so simple is love. Love is so simple. We can all love. And that's what the shoeboxes are about. It's showing love to other people because God is love.
I love that. What a great memory. And everyone that's been mean to their brother or sister today and heard that, they feel convicted right now.
Go buy candy. Go buy a piece of candy.
Go give them a candy, give them a little piece. That's
right.
That's so kind of your family to share that way. So I hope that inspires other families to share too.
Share more candy.
That's right. At least candy. Well, thank you, Vlad, so much. Spasiba, Vlad.
Spasiba.
Thank you so much for sharing your story today. And I'm just so thankful for the ministry that you're representing, and hope a lot of families will be a part of that this year again. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Wow. I loved hearing his story and learning about the colorful experience that was used to teach children who Jesus is and how much he loves them. If you've ever packed a shoebox, isn't it so exciting to know how much these items mean? The school supplies meant so much to him and his brother. The toys were ones that he had crafted with paper and bottle caps with his siblings before. And the dental floss was the item he remembered the most. I loved when he talked about how our gifts go further than we think and bless more people than we can imagine. The purpose of the box is to teach children what Jesus' love looks like, because here's the thing, Jesus is the gift. They get to hear the gospel when they get these boxes, and it's a way they get to see what unconditional love looks like. And Jesus is truly the best gift and the best gift giver. Such an inspiring story. I'm so thankful that we got to hear that today. Well, I am so excited to kick off Operation Christmas Child this month. My church is actually participating in this ministry. We're going to be bringing in donated items and having a packing party in November where we pack shoeboxes filled with fun toys, school supplies, hygiene items, and then Operation Christmas Child delivers them to children in need around the world. And this demonstrates God's love in a tangible way. For many of these children, the gift-filled shoebox is the first gift they have ever received. This year, 2021, Operation Christmas Child hopes to collect enough shoeboxes to reach 9.7 million children. So let's be a part of that together. You can pack a shoebox with your family and drop it off during National Collection Week. National Collection Week is November 15th through the 22nd. There are more than 4,000 locations nationwide to collect shoeboxes. I also want to tell you about a fun opportunity for you to join me and the Collide Kids podcast listeners in reaching a goal of building 50 shoeboxes together online. We talked about this a little bit in the episode. Building it online is super easy. Just go to thecollidekidspodcast.com and click the button that says Give to OCC, and then click the Build a Shoebox Online link to get started. Or you're welcome to make a financial donation as well. So let's do this together and see if we can build 50 shoeboxes online. Can we do it? I think we can. Well, now it's time for the kids only segment. This is the part of the show where you get to be on the podcast. I'm so excited for you guys to meet my friend Eva, who is from Ukraine, and she will be sharing John 3:16 in Russian.
Иоанна 3:16. «Ибо так возлюбил Бог мир, что отдал Сына Своего Единородного, дабы всякий верующий в Него не погиб, но имел жизнь вечную».
Spasiba, Eva. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love that we got to hear John 3:16 in another language. How cool. Well, I'd love to hear your favorite Bible verse, or maybe there's an encouraging quote that you like from a book or a movie, or maybe you have a favorite joke that you want to share. You can find information about how to send that to me through my website and my social media. I'm on Facebook at the Collide Kids Podcast or on Instagram at Collide Kids Pod. You can also check out my website, thecollidekidspodcast.com. Would you like to support the podcast? Here's a few ways you can do that. Be sure to subscribe and follow this podcast so that new episodes will automatically load each week into whatever podcast app you're using, and leave a rating and a review. It really does help people find out about the show so they can listen too. You can also share the episode with family and friends and tell them why you and your family like to listen. Or you can go to my website and click the link that says Buy Me a Coffee. And anytime you think about it, I always appreciate your prayer support as well. Well, we are going to be talking about Operation Christmas Child for the next few weeks, and I am excited about you guys partnering with me to build shoeboxes online. I hope you'll participate. I hope you'll build them in person as well, just like Vlad was encouraging us to write a note, pray over the boxes, and let's send a box filled with light and love and Jesus all around the world. I hope you guys have an amazing week. Thank you so much for listening today. In case no one has told you, let me be the first to remind you today that God loves you so much. До свидания. That means goodbye.
You don't have to go very far looking for bad news, because somehow it just finds you. So finding peace in the chaos can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be, because the River mobile app exists. The River is a Christian music radio station dedicated to playing music to help you get through life's toughest moments or life's happiest moments and everywhere in between, and all from artists who love Jesus and are real people just like you. Listening is easy. You can download it wherever you get apps from. Just search 1049 The River or listen online at riverradio.com. And know that The River is proud to partner with the Collide Kids podcast.